Day 10 June 12, 1954. The black sedan rolled to a stop in front of the weathered farmhouse just outside of Harlan, Nebraska. Dust swirled in the late afternoon light as Warden Harlan stepped out, his uniform crisp despite the long drive from the juvenile work farm near Salina, Kansas. In the passenger seat sat Caleb Reed, 18 years old, broad-shouldered from months of hard labor, his face tanned and quiet. He carried nothing but a small canvas bag containing a change of clothes, a few tools, and the worn pocket watch that had belonged to his father. "Home, son?" the warden said, not unkindly. "You served your time well. 15 months for what happened with that boy back in town. The court showed mercy after your pa passed. Make something of it." Caleb nodded, stepping onto the cracked earth of the front yard. The farm looked smaller than he remembered. Fields gone fallow, the barn sagging, the house silent. His father, Thomas Reed, had died 3 weeks earlier, buried under a mountain of debt that the bank was already circling like crows. Caleb had been released early on compassionate grounds. As the warden drove away, waving once in the rearview, Caleb turned toward the porch. There, standing in the doorway with wide, earnest eyes, was his 8-year-old brother, Jonah. The boy clutched a battered copy of Professor Abernathy's Compendium of Heroes and Adventurers, the book their mother had left behind years ago when she vanished eastward. "Caleb!" Jonah cried, running forward. They embraced, the smaller boy's arms tight around his brother's waist. "Sally said you'd come today. She's been cooking supper." Sally Hargrove, their neighbor from down the lane, appeared behind him, wiping her hands on her apron. She was 19, practical, with a no-nonsense braid and eyes that missed nothing. "Welcome back, Caleb. The house is yours for now, but the bank papers are on the table. Your pa didn't leave much." Caleb thanked her quietly. Inside, the kitchen smelled of fried chicken and biscuits. Over supper, Jonah chattered excitedly. "We're going to California, right? Like we talked in your letters. You can fix up houses there, carpentry work, and I'll help. And maybe we'll find Ma. The compendium says adventurers always head west when they need a new beginning." Caleb smiled faintly, though his chest tightened. California meant leaving behind the guilt of that night in Harlan when he'd punched a local bully named Ricky Harlan during a stupid argument at a barn dance. Ricky had fallen wrong, hit his head on a post, and never woke up. Caleb had owned up to it immediately. Involuntary manslaughter, they called it. But the whispers in town never stopped. "We'll talk about it tomorrow, Jonah. Get some rest." That night, as the brothers lay in their old beds, Caleb stared at the ceiling. He planned to sell what little remained of the farm, buy a used truck, and drive west with Jonah. Clean start. No more Nebraska ghosts. But fate, as it often does on empty country roads, had other plans. Day 9, June 13th. Morning light filtered through the curtains. Caleb woke to the smell of fresh coffee and eggs. Sally had come over again, efficient as ever. "Figured you boys could use a proper breakfast before you start sorting things." As they ate, a knock sounded at the back door. Caleb opened it to find 2 figures he never expected to see again. Marcus Duke Callahan and Elias Wool Martin, both 18, both supposed to be finishing their sentences at the work farm. Duke grinned, that charismatic, lopsided smile that had gotten him into and out of trouble more times than anyone could count. Tall and lean, with quick hands and quicker wit, he'd been at Salina for boosting cars and running small cons while stood beside him, softer around the edges, with a dreamy expression and a trust fund background that never quite fit the reform setting. Wool's family came from old money back east, but his gentle nature and occasional troubles with medicine had landed him in the system. "How in the world?" Caleb began. Duke laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Warden's car had a big trunk, friend. We slipped in while he was signing your papers. Figured you'd be heading out and we could use a ride. Wool here has a proposition." Wool's eyes lit up. "My grandfather left a safe in his old house up in New York, full of cash and heirlooms. Enough for all of us to start fresh, really fresh. We split it 4 ways. You drive us there, Caleb, and we'll be back on the road west before anyone notices we're gone. 10 days, tops." Jonah peeked around Caleb's leg, fascinated. "New York? Like in the compendium? There are heroes there too." Caleb shook his head. "No, I'm taking Jonah to California. Straight shot on the Horizon Road, the old Lincoln Highway heading west. We've got plans." But Duke was persuasive. He painted pictures of opportunity. Wool's share could fund Caleb's carpentry business 10 times over. Jonah could see real cities, real adventures. And secretly, Caleb felt the pull. Part of him wondered if heading east first might shake loose the weight on his shoulders. Sally crossed her arms, listening from the kitchen. "This sounds like trouble," Caleb read. "Those two are nothing but wandering sparks." By midday, against his better judgment and Jonah's enthusiastic pleading, Caleb agreed to a detour. They'd take the old Studebaker truck his father had left, reliable enough, and head east on the Horizon Road toward New York. Just to the city, grab the safe, then turn around west. 10 days. They packed light. Jonah's compendium, some tools, sandwiches from Sally. As they pulled out, Duke rode shotgun, Wool and Jonah in the back with blankets. The road stretched ahead, flat and endless under the prairie sky. Day 8, June 14th. The truck hummed along the Horizon Road, passing through small towns where grain elevators stood like sentinels. Duke kept the mood light, telling stories of narrow escapes and big dreams. "Life's too short to stay planted in one spot like a fence post," he'd say. "You gotta chase the horizon." Will spoke less but noticed more. He pointed out wildflowers and old billboards, quoting lines from books he'd read in the work farm library. Jonah listened raptly, asking questions about heroes who faced trials on long journeys. They stopped in a town called Crossroads for gas and supplies. While Caleb paid, Duke wandered off and returned with a deck of cards and a mischievous glint. "For entertainment," he claimed. Later that night, camped by a river, Duke tried teaching Jonah poker, but the boy turned it into a lesson on probability from his compendium. Caleb watched them, a mix of amusement and unease stirring. He liked having companions. The road felt less lonely, but he sensed Duke's restlessness, like an engine running too hot. Sally had given Caleb a letter before they left. "Don't let those boys lead you astray. Jonah needs steady ground, not fireworks." He folded it into his pocket, unresolved. Day 7, June 15th. By evening, they reached the outskirts of Chicago. The city's lights glittered like a promise and a warning. They found a cheap motel off the main road. Will mentioned a cousin who might help them get better wheels, but it turned out to be a dead end, literally, when the cousin demanded payment up front. Duke, ever resourceful, borrowed a better car from a lot nearby while the others slept. Caleb confronted him at dawn. "We're not thieves, Duke. It's just temporary," Duke shrugged. "We return it later, or pay for it with the safe money." Tension simmered, but they pressed on, switching vehicles to avoid questions. Jonah read aloud from his book about Ulysses, the wanderer who faced storms and temptations. Caleb wondered if he was making the same mistakes. In the city, they encountered a kind stranger named Victor, a former soldier who ran a small diner. He fed them and shared stories of his own cross-country trek after the war. "The road tests what you're made of," Victor said. "Some men find themselves. Others lose what they had." Wool grew quieter, his thoughts drifting to the medicine he sometimes craved to quiet his racing mind. Duke noticed and slipped him a small bottle from a back alley stop. Caleb disapproved but said nothing, focused on keeping Jonah safe. Day 6, June 16th. The journey continued eastward through Pennsylvania's rolling hills. The new car, a sleek Hudson, ate up the miles. Duke drove fast, windows down, radio playing swing and early rock. Jonah laughed at the wind in his hair. They stopped at a county fair in a small town. Rides, games, cotton candy. Duke won a stuffed bear for Jonah at the ring toss, using sleight of hand that made Caleb suspicious. Will bought books from a vendor and read passages aloud under a tree. That night, around a campfire, the four talked deeper. Caleb spoke haltingly about the night he hit Ricky, the regret that still haunted his sleep. Duke admitted his own father had been a con man who abandoned the family. Will confessed his family's wealth felt like chains. He wanted freedom more than money. Jonah simply said, "Heroes help each other, even when it's hard." Caleb felt a bond forming, fragile as the summer night. Day 5, June 17th. New York approached like a roaring beast. Skyscrapers pierced the horizon as they entered the city. Will directed them to his grandfather's old brownstone in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. The house was empty, shuttered, but the safe waited in the study upstairs. While Will worked the combination, a family code he remembered, Duke paced excitedly. Caleb kept Jonah outside, exploring the garden. Hours passed. Tension built when Will admitted the safe was trickier than expected. Duke grew impatient. "We didn't come all this way for nothing." Day 4, June 18th. Inside the house, arguments flared. Will finally open the safe, stacks of cash, jewelry, old bonds. Enough to change lives. But as they divided shares, Duke suggested they take more or invest in opportunities he knew in the city. Caleb refused. "We take our fair portions and go back to the road west." Jonah, sensing discord, wandered upstairs and found an old atlas, tracing routes with his finger. That evening, they celebrated modestly with takeout and stories. But beneath the laughter, cracks showed. Will looked pale, his hands trembling slightly. Duke's eyes lingered on the full pile of money. Day 3, June 19th. Morning brought chaos. Will had taken too much of his medicine overnight, slipping into a deep, troubled sleep. Duke insisted they wait it out. Caleb wanted to leave immediately. While debating, a knock came. Wool's distant relative, alerted by neighbors. Questions flew. The group slipped out the back, cash divided hastily into 4 bundles stuffed into bags. They fled into the bustling streets of Manhattan. Duke suggested one last stop. An old associate who could help fence a piece of jewelry for extra cash. The meeting went sideways when the associate demanded a cut and pulled a knife. In the scuffle, Caleb stepped in, disarming the man without serious harm, but the encounter left them shaken. Jonah, hidden nearby, watched with wide eyes. "Like the heroes in the book," he whispered later. Day 2, June 20th. Exhausted, they holed up in a rundown hotel near the waterfront. Will recovered somewhat but spoke of wanting to see the ocean one more time. Duke proposed a boat ride in the harbor, symbolic, he said, of new beginnings. Caleb agreed reluctantly, hoping it would calm everyone before the long drive back west. As they prepared, Duke pulled Caleb aside. "You know, with this money, you could forget California. Start something big here, or anywhere." Caleb shook his head. "Jonah and I have a plan. Steady work. A real home." Day 1, June 21st. The final morning in the city. They reached the small boathouse where Duke had arranged a modest motor launch for a short harbor tour. Will seemed peaceful, almost resolved. He had written letters the night before, one for each of them, tucked into their bags. On the water, the breeze was fresh, the skyline majestic. Jonah pointed out landmarks, reciting facts from his compendium. For a moment, everything felt possible. Then Will stood, smiled gently at his friends, and said, "Thank you for the adventure." He had taken something stronger that morning. Before anyone could react, he collapsed peacefully in the boat. Panic set in. Duke rushed to check on him. Wool was gone. A quiet suicide, his pain finally quieted. Caleb, stunned, tried to take control. Duke, however, fixated on the remaining cash and Wool's share. He'd want us to have it all. Fair is fair. A struggle ensued on the rocking boat. Duke lunged for the bag. Caleb, stronger and steadier, struck him once. Hard enough to knock him unconscious but not to kill. He bound Duke's hands loosely with rope from the boat. Jonah hid below deck, trembling but brave. Caleb knew he couldn't leave Duke to drown. He maneuvered the boat near a quiet cove, placed the unconscious Duke in a small rowboat tied alongside, and weighted the stern with stones to balance a small leak in the bow. "When you wake, paddle easy," Caleb muttered. "The current will take you to shore if you don't chase trouble." He transferred Wool's body respectfully to the larger boat, planning to alert authorities anonymously later. With his and Jonah's shares secure, plus a portion set aside in Wool's name for any family, Caleb started the engine and headed back toward the dock. But fate intervened again. A sudden afternoon wind whipped up, common on the harbor. Duke stirred, saw the money bag near the bow, and in his greed, leaned forward to grab it. The shift unbalanced the rowboat. Water rushed in through the leak. Duke, who had never learned to swim properly despite his bravado, flailed and sank beneath the waves. Caleb, watching from a distance, felt a wave of sorrow and relief. He couldn't save everyone. Not Ricky back home, not Wool, not Duke from his own choices. But he could save his brother. The horizon ahead. Back on solid ground, Caleb and Jonah made their way to a quiet bus station. They mailed Wool's letters and an anonymous note about the incidents. With the cash carefully hidden, they bought tickets westward, not flashy, but honest. As the bus pulled out of New York, heading toward the Horizon Road that would eventually carry them across the country, Jonah opened his compendium. "The greatest adventures end with going home," he read. "But sometimes home is wherever you build it next." Caleb put an arm around his brother. "We'll fix houses in California, plant roots, and if Ma's out there somewhere, the road will show us." Behind them, the city faded. Ahead lay open miles, mistakes left on the water, and the quiet promise of second chances. The Horizon Road, stretched like a thread connecting past regrets to future possibilities. Sally would be proud, Caleb thought, and somewhere, in the vast American landscape, for young lives had intersected, changed each other, and parted ways as the summer of 1954 rolled on. Some travelers chase the setting sun. Others learn that the real journey is learning what to carry and what to leave behind.